into hunting, but I have a father-in-law who's big into hunting, so I've started hunting. But the bottom line, the Constitution says that you have the right to keep and bear arms, and therefore you have the right to keep and bear arms. Our Supreme Court, I think correctly, recently decided that that is an individual right. Now, I think it's an individual right because in 1793, when our Bill of Rights passed, there were no organized police forces in this country. So to say that the Second Amendment only applies within the context of militias ignores that fact. It's in there so that people can defend themselves and their families and their communities. And so it's important, unless somebody wants to propose some amendment to the Constitution, we ought to keep following. You know, last time we had one of these, it was Saturday morning. I think everyone was wired up with coffee, and we have more sunlight coming in too. But here, we're in sort of a, and this is comfortable. It's a good set. I really appreciate those who helped organize it. Colonel Graves, Vince, Brandy, and others. But if you're feeling a little tired, I understand, and I'll take some of the blame too. So, any other questions? Taxes? Does anyone really want to learn about where I'm at? You and I can talk about that after. Yes. No. Yeah, I can talk about it if you like. What do you think, Colonel? All right, for the record, since it was asked, I do not favor conquering Mexico. No, she asked me why Mexico is never a state, and actually, that's, you know, if you look back historically, it actually is we had some wars in that area of the country. We had some battles, and we did acquire territory, and we called them things other than Mexico. We've got New Mexico, we've got Arizona, we've got Texas. So there is some real history there, and but now it's part of the United States, and I think they've trademarked the name Mexico. So maybe that's the reason Mexico is never. But you know, we've still got a very close relationship just because of proximity with that country, and we get a lot of our oil from Mexico. And here's a more serious answer to the whole thing: is we're both, to varying degrees, free people, and we exercise our freedoms by exchanging things with one another, by trading with one another. We get oil from them, and that's something that helps bring down the cost of our energy needs, so that's a good thing. There are some markets that we send things there too, so no one's asked any questions about trade. I know there's some strong feelings about that, but I'm not one of these people who wants to build a wall around the United States. We live in a globally competitive economy. I believe people should have access to affordable goods and services, and I believe that our businesses ought to have access to foreign markets so that we can sell things over there too. So that's part of our relationship with Mexico. Now, when it comes to trade agreements, and this wasn't even the question that was asked, but I'll pivot a bit. We have these thousands of pages trade agreements that were called free trade. And buried within these trade agreements are a lot of regulations, a lot of restrictions, and it's not entirely free trade. Free trade is one without all those different rules and whatnot. Free trade is not something that's controlled by the World Trade Organization, which actually imposes tariffs, which is not free trade either. So do favor opening up other markets for our goods and services, but really trade agreements are things that you look at on a case-by-case basis to see whether it's going to grow jobs here in the United States and allow people to purchase more affordable goods and services for their families. I tried to make something out of it. Is that, yeah. Those are really good points.
Bartering is something that I think is not done enough in this country, where we can take what we have to give and trade it to somebody.
Now that still happens. Bartering still happens, especially in smaller towns I've found. We do it. I know my father-in-law does that quite a bit. If somebody needs a contract drafted up and they just don't have any money to pay, he says, you know what? When I need my roof worked on, just come back, and it works that way in small communities a lot of times, and that's a good thing. Harder to do in large cities because people, I don't think, have developed those same bonds of trust with as many people. But you mentioned a couple of things. First is the lawsuits, and I acknowledged earlier that there's a very real thing out there called defensive medicine. Doctors, good medical practitioners, I think, rationally fear that at some point down the line, if they don't order a lot of tests, or perhaps in some cases overprescribe certain medicines, they're afraid that somebody's going to get sick and blame them, and maybe a clever attorney is going to persuade a jury that that they owe a lot of money to whoever the victim or alleged victim is. So that's our real phenomenon, and it helps drive up health insurance costs, or health costs, because people are prescribing supply and demand. Prescribe more treatments, those treatments cost more over the long run. So that's why I said earlier that I think there ought to be tort reform. Now, there's a respectable argument out there that says lawsuits aren't interstate commerce. It's a constitutional argument. Therefore, it ought to occur at the state level reform as opposed to federal level. Then you asked me about paying for medical expenses out of pocket. And most expenses decades ago were paid for out of pocket. People had predictable ailments. When they had sore throats, they've even broken arms, they just paid for that out of their pocket. Health insurance wouldn't pay for that. But today, health insurance is not really insurance. It's like prepaid medical care. It covers about everything. And that's why it's so expensive. It pays for entirely predictable conditions. Let me give you an example. If your car insurance covered wiper blades that were worn out, replace those. Or if your car insurance paid for door dings to be fixed, no one here could, well, I certainly couldn't afford car insurance. You'd have to pay a lot of money for car insurance. Maybe Steve could. But,
I have 5 kids. No. I can't afford it now.
Let me give you another analogy to just tell you how absurd our health insurance system is. Imagine,